Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with return guest Alex Genadinik. Alex is a top 1% Udemy instructor. He teaches business, marketing, productivity, and professional skills. And I think it's been almost 5 years since we had Alex on here. And back then, Alex had 87 courses on Udemy and 66,000 students. And I know that now he's at, last time I checked, it was at 100 courses and 150,000 students with 2 million plus downloads across iOS and Android, 15 books on Amazon, 2 million views on YouTube. Alex does everything. He's even a musician and has tons of hobbies. And so we are going to tap into how you can do everything, how you can be this prolific person and create all kinds of amazing things that change the world and help the world. So Alex, glad to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
I'm excited to talk to you. You were the second guest I ever had on my podcast. That is over at marketeroftheday.com/102. And you and I reconnected and I saw your Amazon books and I'm looking at one with 678 reviews, 243 reviews. So you're all about the big numbers and doing big things. And so what the heck have you been up to the last 5 years besides everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, it always feels like the other people, the people I look up to, they're always bigger and better, right? So I don't feel like my numbers are that big. I think in the recent years, I mostly focused on Udemy. So now I have actually over 500,000 students. And as you said, actually, even so many years ago, I had 80 something courses, and now I have about 125 something close to that. But the number of students really grew. So what I've really been up to is actually I've had to scale back of all the things that I've done before, like the YouTube. I stopped really focusing on it. A lot of my coaching, I stopped doing that because by reduction of all the peripheral things, I was able to focus on the things that are the most important and prioritize those. And those really have become the Udemy courses, because you notice the number of courses grew rather slowly compared to where it started. But I've actually been improving them a lot. So even though the courses themselves, they're, kind of same courses, inside the courses, it's so much better now. So I've been focusing on making myself a better instructor, making the courses better. And then also what I've had grow is something called course licensing, or some people know it as PLR, private label rights licensing, where people, let's say if they want to start their own course business, they can, they have to make the courses, or they have to ask somebody else to put the courses there, which is really hard. And so it takes a while and the courses may not be so good. But what I provide is a service where overnight people can license my courses and put them on their site and start selling right away. So it saves them months and months of effort. And that is a service for, small businesses just starting out, and actually some large companies who also have the same problem. Like they have to film and, selling courses is popular today. It's a really good business today, especially with the whole upskilling with COVID. It's a really good COVID-proof business because everybody's sitting at home learning. And so a lot of people have been coming to me to help them get their own e-learning business up and running. So that's actually one of my strong focuses. It's not very visible, like, Udemy, you can see the numbers, but this is kind of like a B2B thing where you wouldn't even know that it exists, but it's actually been a big part of my focus. And I've had to cut almost everything else out almost entirely, just because I wanted to make time for my music that, which, it's hard to get people to listen to because everyone has different tastes, but it's something that I'm passionate about outside of work.
So many things happening, and even like you mentioned there about the music, music is a way to express oneself, and something that's been on my mind the last few years is even the way that you set up your business is a way to express yourself as well. Like some people just have one message, or some people are very diligent and they put out like a YouTube video every day, or some people say, well, I'll make one new course a year. And it seems like your approach here, at least from hearing the way you describe it, is kind of like an 80-20 sort of thing. Like you try all these different things and then you say, well, now I can examine the landscape and say, out of all these different courses I've done, or out of all these different, web properties I've developed, now what is what's making me money, what is a good use of my time, what is enjoyable for me, what can I sustain, and then you have the freedom to pick and choose and make maybe some of these risky but calculated decisions of saying, well, I'll throw out these 20 things, or I won't put any more time into these 10 things. And then I'll focus more on what I really want to do, based not just on your own ideas or your own action, but also based on the feedback from the marketplace. So you mentioned that part. And then you mentioned this whole idea of being a better course instructor, or going back and revising your Udemy content. And this is really good timing, because I was driving just yesterday, and I was playing some things on my YouTube playlist. Like, I don't know about you, Alex, but sometimes if I see random things on YouTube that I want to learn, I'll put it in like a learning playlist. And then when I'm driving, I'll just play the playlist. Even if it's screen capture and videos and things, I can get most of it just from listening and while driving. And one of the things that was on my list for the longest time was Udemy, having a course on Udemy. And I think that from what I've heard from Udemy and what I've seen people do is they resist it, because they say, well, I only get this little bit of money. But then the upside seems to be that it's like this huge marketplace, like, Amazon or Fiverr, where you might get, all these fees taken out at this low price, but you get all this traffic, you get all these students. And then when you look at almost any Udemy course that seems to be selling at all, there's so much detail that goes into it, and you can tell that they revise it. Like, the description's super long and detailed, and it'll say like updated such and such month. So I see that happening. And so that makes a lot of sense. And then you mentioned this idea of licensing your content, private label rights, which is a really cool idea, because say you have like your productivity course, and maybe someone wants to make like real estate or productivity for realtors, right? Like real estate time management, real estate productivity. They can take your videos and say, here's the core, the foundation, and here's our additional checklist, or here's our extra videos. And so it's a cool starting point, as you mentioned, for people who can't record this video training or want to add on to what you have. And so it's a cool, like you said, a way to make money that you might not see on the outside. So much happening. And so I guess my first question, or third question, whatever, is, so on Udemy, what seems to be like selling the best for you, or what course recently has really been your passion? What's been really exciting as far as all these 125 courses?
That's a good question. So on Udemy in general, it's a technology first marketplace, and I don't really make those kinds of courses, unfortunately. So the other skills, the other popular topics are, business, marketing, productivity, and professional skills. Professional skills have really taken off in the last sort of since COVID, especially. Everybody's trying to upskill. So this is like a big thing now. And there's a lot of demand for that. The problem with those kinds of courses is there's such a low barrier to entry. Like, anybody can make time management course, or motivation course, or whatever, courses on those topics. They're very competitive. So it's actually better to create courses that are forward looking. So for example, this year, there's a lot of talk about the metaverse. And even if you don't know about it, you probably heard of it. And even if you heard of it, if you think it's stupid, you still are like, okay, this thing is still kind of happening, even though it doesn't entirely make sense. Like, why would I want to have friends that are characters, cartoon characters, right? I'm not a child. So, but at the same time, last year, I created a course on, the whole metaverse experience, how to start a business in the metaverse, different ways to make money in the metaverse versus, apps versus, I'm going to be adding how to invest in it through cryptocurrency. Actually, in this 2022 coming up, I'm planning some lectures around that. So this forward-looking topic, there's a lot of people who are going to be interested in it tomorrow. And I started making it yesterday. And so I think today, this is how to do Udemy, because you don't want to do time management, motivation, because they're cool, very useful things that I use all the time and every day. But I'm also on those topics competing against thousands of other courses that teach, let's say, they try to teach the same way. Let's say, of course, I'm better. Just kidding. But every instructor thinks that they have something different about them that is good. And I'm no different. But at the same time, I understand there's 1,000 other courses. Whereas the metaverse and, virtual reality, augmented reality, this kind of stuff that's coming around the corner. So I think if anybody getting into Udemy, they should find something unique that they can teach, or something forward looking that's going to be not competitive today, but that's going to be competitive tomorrow, so they can jump on it.
And that's interesting to think about, because you always hear about doing, product research, market research, and they say, well, look at something that people are looking for, but is not yet crowded with all the competition, and try to find that gap to fill. And sometimes it's easy to drive yourself crazy and getting too deep into the numbers. But then this is refreshing to hear you saying this, because you're saying, well, also look towards the future, that you can kind of look at the data, look at the numbers, but also if this is something that's being talked about a lot in the news a lot, there's always articles about it, but it's not quite yet developed. If it's still kind of the Wild West, then that seems to be something to get yourself established in now. So that way, when all these other people, in a few years, when they're making their course about the metaverse, well, then you already will have all these sales, all these students, all these reviews, and they will be behind it, and you will be ahead because you're the one that thought ahead towards the future.
Exactly. You'll be the deterrent that they'll see that, like, oh my God, it's so competitive. And you'll be that thing that's too competitive.
Good place to be.
Yeah, that's preferable.
Well, cool. And then so that's like your Udemy business that you've been growing, and then also you've been killing it, crushing it, whatever the kids say these days, on Amazon with creating all your books. So what have you learned about book publishing and Amazon these last few years?
So when we first talked, I think it was a great time for Amazon, almost no matter what you're selling. Since then, I've had a client. He had a great product that he created. It wasn't some, Me Too copycat product, but we took him from like literally zero on Amazon. I said, put yourself on Amazon, because he was trying to sell from his own website, to a $10+ million a year revenue business. So these kinds of things have been happening on Amazon. But recently, actually, Amazon has gotten too hard in some sense, because we're not looking at it now, but if we imagine the Amazon search page, which is how most products get discovered, is through search. So the Amazon search page is overflowing with ads. And basically, when you're a seller, you have to pay commission to Amazon on the sale. And then to get the sale, you no longer get the free traffic as much, because you have to pay and compete with ads. So your margin is cut tremendously. And it was already a complaint that the margins are cut tremendously before, because the people were like, well, I can collect 100% on my site if I sell, and I have to give Amazon not only like a third, but like I have to play by their rules and their terms of service. So all these complaints were already quite severe and people were quite vocal about them. Now, a very significant complaint has gotten added that there's another, who knows how much expense of ads got added on it, where a lot of sellers are no longer profitable anymore, because you have to bid higher. When the ads started, they were cheap and they were very profitable. Now it's quite competitive because everybody's doing ads. And so now you're basically just driving yourself to make a sale. You're making it unprofitable for yourself. So Amazon is becoming, either you have to figure out ads like to be the top 5% of people serving ads, which is not even possible for a lot of products with small margins, or you just have to take a smaller and smaller amount of traffic that Amazon is going to give you for free, which really becomes like, why if it's smaller and smaller, and if it's dwindling, what's the future of that, and is it worth spending your investing in as a seller? So I think today the Amazon marketplace is a lot less rosy, even though I have quite the rosy glasses that I look at it with. Even to me, it's less rosy.
And you're reminding me of when I was a kid, I used to play a game called Sid Meier's Pirates. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
No, but I know Sid Meier's Civilization, and I love that one.
Yeah, and Pirates, it's kind of like instead of building, you go and attack different like areas in the Caribbean, but basically you can choose which time period to play in, and you can choose to do like the very early time when it's largely untapped and not really settled, and you can go around and have a lot of fun. It's really easy. and then you can choose like the middle era, like I don't know if then it gets in like maybe like the 1700s or something, or 1600s. I didn't pay attention to like the year, just the how far along it is. But in the middle, then you kind of have it's more established, but then you're fighting a lot of other pirates, and then you can choose like the later years when there's like so much civilization is built up and you have a really hard time because the police are the good guys are always attacking you, and it kind of, you're explaining this reminds me of this, where there's like in any of these platforms, there's the early days where it's not really established, where it's difficult in that there might not be as much traffic as you want. And then there's maybe like the sweet spot, the middle ground, where there's traffic, there's competition, plus it has not yet edged you out money wise. And then there's maybe like the later years, which is maybe like what maybe Google and Facebook have become now, where the bleak, harsh reality is that on some platforms like Facebook, people are talking all the time about $20 cost per acquisition, $25 cost per acquisition, saying, I'm going to lose money acquiring this person, and hit them with all these upsells and all these marketing, hoping that maybe in a year, maybe I'll make that money back for that one person or longer, or maybe I'll lose $10,000 just to get profitable. And that's a playground that we can choose to play in. But like you said, at that point, you make a decision where you say, I've already put in the work. I've already put in the Amazon books or whatever you've built up on that platform, YouTube videos, whatever it is. And you say, well, I've already done the work. It's all sitting there. It's not costing anything for it to be there. But then I can choose, well, do I want to continue making this my focus? Do I want to make that business decision of this percentage of my profit goes back into advertising? Am I considering this like a break even, a loss leader, or do I shift over into some other new up and coming marketplace? Because as you know, there's always some new place to get traffic, to build a following. And as long as we kind of enjoy the process, play that game of go to somewhere new and get these new followers, then maybe we can kind of choose to be a nomad, or be someone that's maybe every year kind of examine what we have, what our focus is, and say, well, if Amazon is no longer profitable for me or serving me, now maybe I'll move over and put more focus into maybe something like Udemy.
Exactly. It's hard to be a pirate these days on Amazon. We have to find new Caribbeans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. The blue ocean, as they say, right? Instead of the red ocean.
Something new, which is kind of like the forward-looking things. And I feel like, who am I to tell Amazon how to run their business? Obviously, they know what they're doing. But I feel like there's an element of greed happening where it's like they're really squeezing out the sellers, where their business is the sellers. Like there's a certain point at which if the sellers go away or don't focus, they get left with fewer sellers, and that becomes Amazon, right? So at some point, there is kind of like a breaking point. Don't know what it is. I'm sure they know better than I know, but certainly for me as a pirate of Amazon, I'm searching for somewhere else, which is kind of like, I don't yet love the metaverse. It's not like I'm not like a champion of it, but it's the thing that's coming around. And just from experience, I know I've got to be present in whatever's coming around in case there is space for me there. I'll be fat. I'll be quick on it, right? And every industry in the last 10 years has been like that. Like, getting into e-learning, I got into it, I think, 2014, and I thought I was late, and it would have been better in 2012, right? And YouTube would have been better early, and all these things like cryptocurrency. Imagine, you can see the charts, right? All the other businesses have their own charts that are very similar looking. All the other industries, it's just they don't have charts that show that, but they're essentially this. Like if you want to get into the mobile apps, okay, 10 years ago it's great, now not so great. So basically what I would be doing is sort of like parting ways with Amazon, perhaps partially because my stuff is already there, but not really investing too much time in new things there, but really spending my time looking for new pastures. There's this amazing quote I found, which I hope I don't forget by the time like the sentence gets to where I have to tell you the quote. But it's something like, you waste years by not being able to waste hours. And it's a quote about research, right? If you can't try stuff, if you don't give yourself, if you kind of head down just working, which is what most of us usually are doing, you will miss the new Bitcoins, the new metaverses, the new whatevers, right? and that's where I think the not always, but very often the rewards are very, very disproportional.
And yeah, and so there's something to be said about experimenting, especially in new frontiers, new ideas, new platforms, maybe something that's off the beaten path from your usual business, your usual day to day, something that's different from the competition you see. Because as you said earlier, it's about the future, not about the present. And so the things that are out there right now and the competition that's out there right now might not be what will be the big hot thing in 2 years. So play around and do those experiments and create things that people will want years from now. And that's a cool and a fun way to think about it. And then this whole idea of being in the dwindling age of being the pirate, or however you want to call it, it seems like it's just a fact of life. Like even like you heard a lot about this with like the app stores, right? With like the Apple and the Google app stores. At first it was easy, then there was competition, and there was all kinds of rules, and then you couldn't collect this opt-in data, and then they were going to put ads in your apps. And it seems like just it's not even unique to any one platform. And in fact, it seems like those marketplaces that become huge, like Amazon, it's like they kind of do it on the backs of the hardworking pioneers. And it just seems like the marketplaces that don't do it are the ones that we don't hear about. So maybe we just have to say, well, these are what the rules of life and the internet and of these huge giants are. So let's ride the wave, and then find other waves to ride, and we can all figure out a way to have fun and make money, as long as we know what kind of game that we're playing. So we mentioned that you're looking for these new pastures, and you have the apps and the courses. So speaking of new pastures, what is on the horizon for you? What's up and coming for you?
Cool. Actually, I wanted to interject a little bit, because there's an interesting monkey wrench I can throw into this. Because having said that, it's valuable to experiment, which fine, and having said that, let's do forward-looking things. At the same time, there's so many forward-looking things. Like this year, I experimented a little bit with NFTs, the non-fungible tokens. It's the art world of cryptocurrency, whatever, and because I make music, so for me it's very natural. I already make things that could be NFTs, right? And it's like, well, what if I make them into NFTs? And so I spend a little time experimenting with it. And if you have a lot of these kinds of things, which there are, like there's NFTs, and then there's different spaces within cryptocurrency, and then there's augmented reality, virtual. There's a lot of stuff. Then I can keep like I can just keep naming, comma, this after this. So there's a lot of things, and so at some point it becomes disfocus, and it's really damaging, which really is exactly the antithesis of where we started, where it's like, let's do 80-20 of really good focus. Because once you identify what's really going to be the lucrative, profitable side of your business, do hyper focus on that. Perhaps not even 80-20, but like 95-5, or something like that, right? How does that? It's completely, at least it sounds completely contradictory to, well, make time to experiment and do different things, right? Because they sound almost mutually exclusive, and it's really hard to balance it, which is the art of it, I think, because you definitely don't want to stay in stale industries that are slowing in growth and are adding all these problems. But at the same time, if you don't overfocus in one, you're not going to grow in one, right? Like Udemy really requires tremendous focus, because there's 50,000 other instructors who are like just waiting to take my students away, right? So I think there's no like set rule for how to do this. Every situation is a little different, but I kind of give myself, at least as an example, this is not a great example for everyone that everyone can go and use right away, but at least some kind of an example that, there's every month or 2 months, I have something that I experiment with very well. Like I give it a good shot, right? Because if you run an experiment poorly and you get poor results, it's not the thing, it's the experiment, right? The problem with the experiment. So I make sure I give it a good experiment and allocate some time, but I make absolutely sure that the most important things that I have in my business, whether it's the best-selling courses or the best-selling services or this PLR thing, the licensing, that I'm still devoting a lot of time to that. and just taking a little bit of time off to the new things. But the new things, they're vital. Otherwise, we all just become dinosaurs. This is, when I study computer science, they're like, study the new stuff. Otherwise, you're going to become a dinosaur. This is literally how they. Maybe it was just the one teacher I had, but that's I remember that people telling me that. So that's something I wanted to mention because it's otherwise without that, it's a little bit contradictory, the points we're making in this conversation.
And yeah, and what I'm getting from you saying that is how important it is to be dynamic. That like sometimes you need to be focusing on just like the new things or the present things or the past things. And if you have those weaknesses, maybe get someone on your team who is good at, in a software example, someone who's good at making the proof of concept, or someone who's good at fixing the bugs, or someone who can figure out the user interface. But what I'm hearing from you saying here is if you're too much on one thing, if you're too much of only experimenting, that's not good. Too much of what's already established, that's not good. And so you're saying that we need to keep in mind of maybe doing some of each type of action or each type of thinking.
Yeah, and just being really good at prioritizing. So like, for example, like my Udemy, I spend a bulk of time perfecting my courses, and I make new courses every once in a while, but I very intensely work at perfecting the old ones. And then at the same time, Udemy, the other point I forgot to make just now is that the other thing that's extremely synergistic is the licensing, right? The more courses they have, the better they are, the better the licensing business will work. They're extremely synergistic. Whereas the NFT, they felt synergistic to the music, but they kind of weren't as it played out. And so still there's a priority of like, I have a hyper priority on the thing that's working, which is the courses and the licensing, and they work well together. So it's kind of, they help each other. It's not a total disfocus. But then outside of that, everything else gets a tiny bit of time, including in that the experimentation. So yes, you should be dynamic, but also if something is working, really give it a great effort because it's super competitive. And if it's not, it's going to be, and you got to get ahead.
Interesting. Yeah. Like have that prioritization. So that way, if something is not really proven, or is just kind of something you're doing on the side, maybe that gets a little bit of a percentage of your time. But if something is showing promise, if something is working better than expected or taking off faster than you thought, maybe you can inflate that to take up more of your day, at least temporarily, to actually give it the attention it deserves. So that way you're not stuck in the thing you were mentioning at the beginning, where if all of your side projects are just split up equally, if you have like 25 different side projects and nothing gets focused, nothing gets priority or attention, then it's just there's no progress being made. So that's interesting to think about. That kind of there's like dynamicness, not just in being able to switch gears, but also in the feedback and saying, if this Amazon book or this app or this Udemy course or this NFT I'm putting out suddenly gets its attention, let me put everything else on pause, or let me slow everything else down and just focus on that while there's still time to do it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, there's been so much to think about, and even just talking to you makes you feel like I need to get to work and get to getting all those things.
Get in the metaverse. Get in the metaverse now.
But before it takes off, and who knows, maybe soon you'll have a Udemy course and an Amazon book and an app about how to make an NFT with your music specifically, or something like that. There's always that whole idea of you're doing something, and if you can prove that it works and you can teach it and then you can license it, it can all connect, or some of it can connect in ways that you just have to kind of let sit and think about for months or years until you finally make the connections. And so, and also what comes to mind too is there's some kind of Steve Jobs thing that he's always used to mention about how there's like the object, the technology, the tool, but there's also what you create with it. Like you just think about how well that iPhones and iPads took off because the focus was on the apps. Or there was one of the iterations of they launched iPad where they said, well, you can like play musical instruments on it, and you can like collaborate, and you can do drawing and things like that, as opposed to just saying, here's how many gigahertz and gigabytes are in this. They said, well, numbers and the tool is great, but what can you do with the tool? I'm hearing a lot of that from you as far as like, use NFTs to sell your music and use the metaverse for this function. That's an important reminder. Just like, it's not just about the tool. It's the creative output you get from it.
Yeah, especially in the well, NFT also, but in the metaverse, like we can create things. I mean, it's a little technical, so we can't create everything, but it's an open field where it's the mobile apps of 2008 right now is kind of like the uh that world of the metaverse.
Cool. So it's never too late as long as you pay attention to what the new up and coming thing is. And so something that stood out to me when we spoke 5 years ago is I think at that time like you didn't even have like a website, a hub. It was always you'll find me on there, so that platform. And so you have so many things going on. Is there a website now? Is there a hub where someone can go and find out everything that you're doing all in one place, or is it still go here and there?
Yes, there's two really, one for my music and one for everything business related. So my website for the business related website is problemio.com, which is a domain I got a million years ago, and every time I say it, it feels a little funny, but it's problemio.com. And the music website where I have everything is touchedbyasong.com.
Fantastic. Touchedbyasong.com to find out about Alex's music, and then problemio.com to discover about his business, mobile apps, and everything else he has going on. And so, as we're wrapping up, winding down our conversation, Alex, do you think there's anything that we left out, didn't have time for, that you want to throw in at the end here?
Well, actually, I'm the most excited about the music, because and also in light of our conversation, because since we touch on things that are difficult, how to promote things, music is the hardest one. Like it's impossible, right? Because all the famous musicians, they have, studios and a bunch of money thrown at them, and even though they're not the best, like the mainstream top 40 hits, they're all signed by a record label, which pushes them, right? They have connections to television, they have connections to radio, they do that. So if you're an independent musician, you have to be the most on top of your game. It's harder than Amazon, it's harder than Udemy, it's harder than just about any industry, because you're already at a tremendous disadvantage just from the people you have to be better at, have millions of dollars behind them from the studio and connections and everything you ever dream of, they have it. So that actually is fascinating for me, because obviously I'm amateur musician, but I'm like, sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, well, I know marketing and I know productivity and I know all these professional skills, perhaps I have a chance, right? Because maybe it can be kind of the equalizer. But obviously the music has to become better, and all the time I'm focusing on trying to make the music better, because if you're, it's like, the domain is touched by a song, but if a listener is not touched objectively in their own experience, regardless of what I think about the music, then nothing, they're not coming back, right? So I think focusing on the product quality in this, like in a hyper way, just like I've been focusing on Udemy product quality, but this requires, like, it's not just a product people consume, it's a product that has to make people feel something, kind of, and not like feel happy for a second, oh, I learned something, but feel something deeper, right? Like music does. It's actually tremendously hard to create, and it's perhaps like my biggest challenge that I have. So from a business and productivity perspective, I think that's quite fascinating. It's too bad we got to it at the end of the interview, but this right now is what sort of is breaking my brain right now. Like, how do I crack this, and how do I do this? So that maybe we'll save that for next time. If we do another one, we're like, let's see how your music went. Did it fail entirely, or did you find a way? What was the key? Because if you can succeed in music as an independent musician, you can do anything, because there's nothing, it's maybe being a comedian is also as hard, but but competing against these studios or record labels is just so difficult that it's a cool challenge to maybe discuss next time.
Yeah, well, we will have to have you back to discuss music specifically. And I mean, I have guests. I've had to have guests before where their brains are musicians plus programmers, and that's interesting to think about too. Because I mean, think about how hard programming is in general, and like building like these bigger and bigger systems and trying to find like the one single little bug and accounting for all these different things. There's a lot of parallels there with like the math and the music and the discipline and the creativity and the thinking outside the box and taking on these big, almost impossible challenges. But it sounds like you're having fun and you're kind of doing the things that are paying the bills, but then also using these skills and even like, like marketing and things like that and applying them into the music. And I think that we can all relate to being touched by music in some way of, well, this song makes me excited or sad or reminds me from being a teenager or evokes this memory. And yeah, if you can crack that nut, Alex, if you can kind of create a catchy song that ticks all the boxes, that if it's like popular, but also is emotional and deep and really sticks. I mean, that can be your legacy, right? That can be the thing that you're remembered for, in the same way that they're still playing like Mozart and Beethoven and things like that. It's like centuries later, like this person created this song that lasts forever. I mean, that's an awesome goal to aspire to.
Yeah, and actually, funny you say that. I know we have to wrap up, but I have a song that I made that really recently released that actually I put Beethoven into a contemporary song. You know that the Fifth Symphony from Beethoven. It's the metaphor for it is like a knock on your door, like what are you doing with your life, kind of thing. And so I have the song, a contemporary song, where there's like a person going mad, where like I'm not going to accomplish anything, like I'm not going to set out to achieve my goal, which is kind of strangely enough a productivity topic as well. Uh, but I have that motif and Beethoven in the song, in the story of the song, where the guy is like driven mad by Beethoven. So maybe that would be a good note to wrap up on, which maybe intrigue people enough to go and check it out. And so it's touchedbyasong.com, and it's the Beethoven song or whatever it's called. I think I called it The One Who Didn't, because he's like, what if I become the one who didn't? So maybe that'll be a fun note to
Yes.
to end on, and something a little bit more fun than just dry business.
And as you know, Alex, we want to keep people thirsty, right? You want to put out the course or put out the book and give them something worthwhile, but also say at the end, like, hey, there's this other course, this is other book I want you to check out, or join my mailing list. And so that is the cliffhanger right there, where we're saying we've given people so much to think about and so much to kind of ponder as far as pursuing their dreams before they run out of time, because life is finite, life is limited, their time is limited. There's always these distractions. We need to take action and create things, and also finish things, and also be productive and put things out in the marketplace and get feedback and iterate. But we also want to get it to be good enough, approaching perfection, always knowing that, well, we there's all other things that need to be done. And so we got satisfied as far as speaking about Amazon, apps, and Udemy. But now that your curiosity is piqued by, you say, whoa, like this music Alex is talking about sounds interesting. I want to find out what the heck he's talking about. Touchedbyasong.com is the place to go to hear about that song Alex was referring to, and also just to see what he's created there and what he's established and what you too can do, no matter what your current hang up is or what your dream is. I mean, I know we all have ideas and we say, someday I want to create the book or create the course. Well, maybe someday can be now, at least in a small way. Start taking some action, because as if you looked into any kind of time management, you know that there's discipline and motivation, which means that so many times we say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And once you start doing it, it's kind of fun, right? Even like just, sweeping the floor. Once you start sweeping the floor, you're like, oh, I'm feeling good that I'm actually like getting something accomplished. And so touchedbyasong.com is the place to check out Alex's music, and problemio.com is the place to find out about his apps. Any other links to drop, or is it time to just wrap things up here, Alex?
I think this is pretty much it. Also, I want to give you applause for keeping the podcast going for a while. A lot of people start and they just quit, but you've done a great job by keeping it going. So let's give you a hand also.
All right. It's always good to take a brief pause from the day-to-day and the breakneck tasks and just say, okay, let me look at what I've accomplished and get re-energized and recharge the batteries, move on to what's next. And so we've had Alex Genadinik on the show, one of our first guests. And 5 years later, we've caught up. So problemio.com, touchedbyasong.com, and we'll see you there.